Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Comic Penciling. My name is Joe Catapano. I'm going to go through this part 2 video on digital inking, which is the next step in the line art process. And I'm working on my personal project in this video, just like last video. And for the next couple videos, I'll be doing the same thing. And I'm working on some sample pages to be submitted for a competition for Miller World. But let's get to what I'm doing here before I miss my mark. Right now I'm working on some FX work. And a lot of times you want to do this in a cleaner way, maybe with paths in Photoshop to get some clean lines, but I kind of decided to go the route of doing a hand-drawn kind of feel. So like in the last video, because I did a snap effect on the last video, and I hand drew that just like I'm doing this. So what I'm working on right now is a effect that the sound is of the main character's helmet kind of what's the word? It's almost like a telescope that way it kind of collapses and opens. That's kind of how the helmet kind of piece by piece forms on the main character's face and head. So I think it's a metal sound, and I think I just thought it would sound like a as if you like tapped metal, like tink tink tink, and so that's the sound I picked to illustrate. And I also wanted to describe what I'm doing here design wise, because like in the last video I talked about the use of graphic design in your comics, and I think it's important that you want to not just put a word on a page, but have it kind of meld well with the story. And since the helmet is kind of forming on his head and retracting onto his, not retracting, but forming on his head, it's coming from a big shape and going to a smaller shape. So that's what I'm trying to do with the letters, as if the letters are extending out from the first letter T. So the T would be biggest, and then the I would fall behind it, and then the N would be just a little smaller, and the K would be just a little smaller than that, and down the line, mimicking what the action is in the panel. So that's what I'm going for here. And as you can see, I'm messing with the perspective of how italicized I want the letters and what the look I want to have, and how much the letters should overlap. So my thought process was that as it would get farther down the line with these words, the letters wouldn't be out as far, as if there was a bin motion on the letters coming out one after another. So pretty much straightforward. Once you have your idea, you just need to execute it. And I just turned off the borders on the page, that way I could see. And I want to kind of overlap the border line because it's a transition between two actions, two pages, or two panels rather. And the letters are going to be the connection, and it's kind of going to lead the eye that way over top of the panel. So I'm almost done with what I have here, and the more I pull out, you'll see the pencil work, the rough line work that I have in blue, and you can kind of get the sense of what's happening with the helmet. And I think once I erase away some of the border, it'll overlap on top of the panels and look the way I want it. And this is just an example of how I like to use that a graphic design approach with what I'm doing here. So I just put the letters on top, and I think it's looking the way I want it. In a minute I'm about to start the first panel, and I'm going to work all the way through it. I've got several hours of video that I'm going to be posting in the next few episodes, and we're going to talk about different things, and we'll eventually get back to this helmet part. But for now, I'm about to start on doing the first panel, some of the background elements, and I know I went through background penciling in my Green Lantern videos, and you'll see some of it here. The difference is here, I'm on the computer, so I'm able to copy and paste, and that's, it's a tool just like anything else. So I feel like if I don't use it, it's not using the capabilities that I have. So the first thing I start working on is these floating pods that are holding, they're like platforms that the audience and some of the other members of maybe the racing staff maybe are on to get closer to the action. And I know I kind of just jumped into a little bit of the context of the story, and if you're not familiar, this is a racing story, so it's pretty much the climax where the race is actually about to start. So they're outside on the starting line, and I have to draw the environment and get it to look like it's a real world, and with its own feel. So as you can see, I'm just detailing this floating thing that like I said, holds some of the audience and whatnot, and these little things that are popping out are little cameras, or rather big cameras, that have a giant lens in them and can zoom in, and the press can see exactly what they want to when the race starts, and kind of like what sportscasters do. They're just there they're probably automated too, because in this world everything is done and utilizing AI, and that's the whole part of the story, where all these racers that are going against the main character are AI, and they're just robots. They're kind of refined through science and technology and programming to be the fastest and the best in this world. So that's where our character comes in, because our character is a live person and doesn't have terabytes of data to help him win. So as we go through this panel, you'll see more and more of the world, but right now we're just working on these floating things, and I'm using transform tools and copy and pasting, and I use shift. I hold down shift sometimes to get a straight line when I can't get it the way I want it. I could do that most of the time, but I feel like it makes things stagnant. So you'll see me like redraw over and over to try to get a hand-drawn feel that also is accurate. And like I said, this is just another piece of the tool that you're using. And I say, if you're not using it, because of, if you feel like you're cheating, you're really not. You're cheating yourself. If you want to do your best, then use the best medium. If your pencil had the ability to make a straight line every time, why not use it if it's giving you the right effect? So the only time I don't use these digital tools is the times when it's not producing the right effect that I want. And I encourage anybody to use what they have and don't feel bad about it. So this one in the foreground is bigger than the others, so I try to put it in more detail and keep it consistent. And it's the underside, and I probably maybe through color would darken it up because it's the underside and it's in the foreground, so it might be, you might not see as much as I'm drawing, but I need to draw it in there because you're going to get a little sense of it. No matter how dark it is, you're going to be able to see it a little bit. You see a lot of my brush tools, or my windows for my brushes pop up, and it kind of leads me into what I'm using. I might have talked about it last video, but I use pretty much 1 or 2 brushes, and the one I'm using around right now is a brush that mimics a tech pen, like a Micron or something like that, and it doesn't have a lot of variation. You don't have to really worry so much about pressure. It's more about fine details almost, and that's kind of the way I draw, so it's just natural for me to add detail this way and pretty much put my basic lines in with this brush. One of my favorite artists in comic books is Freddie Williams, and you know, he worked on a few of my favorite books through the years. Right now he's doing some cool stuff with, I think, He-Man and Batman and Ninja Turtle crossovers. But back in the day, he wrote a book about digital workflows, and it was published by DC since he was exclusive with them for a while. And I based a lot of what I have here on that. I mean, I've obviously refined it my own way and wanted to do it my own way, but the basis is off of his approach. And this approach is, he might call what I'm doing right now wireframes, because I'm not putting in really any lighting information into the lines. Not much. Sometimes I'll have a darker line on the shadow side, but for the most part it is just the content at its purest. So and doing it this way enables you to see what you're drawing and analyze it, and you can easily tell if something's not working. Like, I can immediately tell what we're looking at right now with these people. One guy's head is way too big, their tangents and whatnot, and I'm sure I'd go back and fix a lot of these things, hopefully. But because I don't have dark shadows and weird, you know, rendering on top of it, you know, there's nothing there to hide the fact that I'm not doing something right. So he calls this wireframes, and that's where I'm at in this stage, because I'll go back in eventually and add all the darks that I need. And in the background like this, I might not even add anymore. So here I am fixing that guy's head, because geez, that thing was huge. So we're just gonna keep moving on, and I'm drawing this crowd on this platform and trying to make these figures look, you know, like they're doing something, because they're there and they're excited, or they're drunk, or whatever they're doing up there. They're doing something, and that kind of leads you to like a little bit of a talk on making things believable. And just as you write something with personality, you need to draw it with personality. And that's kind of the whole point of gesture, I think, is that the line has its personality. And if you draw a character anatomically right, but stiff and just, you know, almost too perfect, then it doesn't have a mood, or you don't get an emotion from it. So the whole time here, I'm just trying to get those gestures, because I don't have underdrawings for this stuff, so I'm just putting in as much character as I can, and at the same time trying to keep it consistent and work on the errors as I go. And I'm able to work on the errors as I go because I'm working digitally. If I was working with pencil on paper, I would have to figure this stuff out beforehand and lightbox it or something like that. And that's the cool part about working digitally, guys. You just get a chance to kind of edit on the fly, and kind of speeds up your workflow and speeds up the whole process. So I haven't always worked digitally, solely. At first I was really into it because it's easier, and a lot of people, I don't know, they have their own opinions about digital versus traditional, but I think it's easier and it's less stress and gives you a few more capabilities that you don't get traditionally. So it's a good method. That being said, working traditionally has its good methods too, because you're just able to, I don't know, feel the page better. You're not kind of worried about the technical side, so you can just draw and let things flow. I find I get into a flow way easier when I'm working traditionally. It's just me and the paper. I can feel it. It's tactile. You're able to be in the moment a little better. But at the same time, look at what I'm doing right here. I just copied and pasted this top piece to a background element, and I don't have to redraw that now. It just saved me, I don't know, could be 5 minutes, could be 10, could be more, whatever it is, to try to get that consistent. Who knows, it could have taken a while. Either way, that's a huge benefit to working digitally. And I don't normally work this straightforward, where I go from one object of the same kind to the next object of the same kind, because it gets boring. But since I'm able to copy and paste, it kind of kills a lot of the same stuff that I need to draw over and over. So since I just did the background element, now I can add people, and those are different. Those are going to be its own. And I try to keep in mind the scale that I'm using. That first one I just drew, before this one, you could clearly see people's appendages, and with this one I'm trying to just do a little more silhouette, just a bunch of heads. You're not going to see much. Everything's going to try to blend together. And another way to do this, because it brings up a problem that I have working digitally, is I zoom in way too much. And I don't know if you can see it on my navigator right now, because if you look on my navigator at the bottom right, you'll see the red box, and that shows you how much I'm zoomed in. You really shouldn't zoom in that far, because you tend to work on details that will never be seen. In comics, you work on a page that is generally almost double the size that it will be printed at or be viewed at. So you putting in these small details that you can barely see on the original piece, it's probably not going to show up. And the detail will be there and you'll get the mood from it, but you won't really know what's there. And that being said, it's the reason why I have trouble with digital, because I like to zoom in. I can't get away from zooming in and helping my eyes with this workflow. So my general rule is not to zoom in that much, but like I said, once I'm in a flow, I really can't help myself. And yeah, I'm working on another one of these little floaty things. No clue what to call them. You can probably call them levitating. They're almost like new age bleachers in a way. Stands, a floating stand. But I copied and pasted like I did the others, and just working through it, trying to keep them all consistent. And when you're copy and pasting, it's not too hard. You just have to copy and paste, change enough about the paste you did to make it look like it's its own. And sometimes you can get away with more. Like you can see, I'm trying to move things around as much as I can to make it look like I did it from scratch. And that's something that kind of like a must-have. If you're copy and pasting and just leaving it there, people will notice. Maybe not right away, but if they go back and look at the environment specifically, you're definitely gonna tell. So since we're working on a lot of the same stuff, maybe I'll talk about more of the story stuff, the story and everything that's I'm doing right now is something that I've kind of been working out on the side. And it's kind of close to me, but really it's just a personal project that I want to get out to people. But before I wanted to work on the real story, I wanted to get on these sample pages to help me out, figure out all the aesthetics and the character designs, and just see how it came out. And you can tell for yourself when I'm done with all these videos. You'll see in the end what I have. I'm sure I'll post them up, and if you go to my website, I'll have them there as well. But yeah, I'm excited to work on the real thing, because the story is what drives comic books, and the aesthetics need to be there, but that's just a piece of the puzzle. So in this world, it's a sci-fi world, and they're not on Earth. They're on like different colonies, but again, this is not an alien story. It's about the human race kind of evolving, and the themes are just of what human potential really is, and how like a more bionic, binary, and pretty much where does technology play a part in our evolution. It's kind of like my own commentary on what's happening in our own current events. There's a lot of people say that it's inevitable that we're going to merge together, and I think this is just like an in-between part. I think this could totally be possible. Maybe not so trivial and goofy to have it be realized in a space motorcycle race, but eventually, we're not going to be as good as machinery, and technology is just going to go above and beyond us eventually, and this is just kind of a story of us trying to keep up, and kind of proving our own that we can still be relevant. And those are the background themes pretty much, and what I want to come across, or what I want to come across through the story. I can't wait to show you more videos, because I'm nearly done with this one, and I don't get much farther than this. The next video, I feel like I work on some of the motorcycles in the foreground, and some of the androids, and you'll get to see some character work. So I think we're just going to test out some of the background first before I jump off. And these background shapes are just like, I don't know, I feel like I draw a lot from the backgrounds from like Akira, and they're just so detailed that if you ever read any of the Akira manga, it's just what made those books special were the level of detail that he did consistently, and I try to add that a little bit, at least, or emulate it a little bit in the backgrounds here. And it's got to be your own, so I don't try to do it specifically for this one influence, but yeah, that's my goal, is to try to have a well-drawn background in each panel. So we're coming up on the end of my video here, and it's not much left to draw, but before I go, I just want to thank anybody who's been watching and making suggestions. I will be getting to them. And yeah, if you like these videos, I'll be doing more. Please subscribe. You guys are great. Thank you.